The readings of today are inviting us to reflect on the role of the prophets in the economy of our salvation. The prophets are known as a prophet is known as the mouthpiece of God, and prophets speak in the name of God. They speak in the authority of God, by the authority of God. Call Ama Yahweh, thus says the Lord. This is always the prophetic approach. Thus says the Lord. They speak by God's own authority. And in the Old Testament, prophets were known to be the watchmen of the house of Israel. They watched over the house of Israel because they would always remind the Israelites of their covenant relationship with God, and they will always tell them that their actions, choices had consequences, so that if the Israelites will obey God, then they will inherit the land of the promise. But if they would disobey God, if they disobeyed God, then foreigners would invade their land. So the prophets would always remind the Israelites of the consequences of their actions or their inactions, and they served as the watchmen over the house of Israel. But because they spoke truth to power, prophets were not often admired, and they were not often loved by the people. In fact, if you read through the minor prophets in the Old Testament, you come to realize how some of them really ended. Some of them didn't end well. I mean, we read about Isaiah. How did Isaiah end? Isaiah was slain. He was killed by King Manasseh of Judah. Amos the prophet, he was tortured to death, by the priest of Bethel. And Zechariah was slain in the temple. He was slain in the temple by Joash, the king of Judah. Jeremiah was stoned to death by his own people in Egypt. He was even thrown into a well of mud. Ezekiel was slain by the Chaldeans, and Habakkuk was stoned to death in Jerusalem by his own people. John the Baptist was beheaded. We all know that. Jesus was crucified. So you can see that some of these prophets did not really end well. I mean, they had very brutal endings, like the way they were killed. But there will be no change. There will be no change in our society without the prophets. Call them political prophets, religious prophets, social prophets. There will be no change in our society without the voice of the prophets, because they speak truth to power. They confront and challenge evil of all kinds. They are not silent in the face of evil. The evil in us, the evil in our society, systemic evil, the evil in our society, in our state. So prophets, they confront and challenge evil, and that is why they are not recognized. That is why they are not loved. They are not loved by so many people. And my dear friends, you and I know this, that we are very comfortable with those who would tell us what we would want to hear. Like, we are just comfortable with such persons. We align more with those who tell us what we want to hear. And then what happens to those who tell us the very hard and difficult truth that often, makes us uncomfortable? How do we feel about such persons? But that is what prophets do. They tell us those hard and difficult truths that we may not want to hear, but that we need to hear, because the truth will always set us free. And that this truth goes beyond the way we feel. The truth is not sentimental. The truth goes beyond the way we feel. It is precisely how God feels about us, and that is the truth. So they tell us, my dear friends, the hard truth. And it is so important that we come to realize and we ask these questions on this day. Who are the prophets today? And where are the prophets today? Anyone who speaks the truth to you, becomes your prophet. And anyone you speak the truth to, so you could be a prophet to someone else, and someone else could be a prophet to you. So when you speak the truth in charity, the truth must be spoken out of love, out of charity. When you speak the truth in charity to someone else, you become a prophet to that person. And when someone else speaks the truth in charity to you, that person becomes a prophet to you. And that is so important. So that you come to realize that we could also have prophets in our families. We could have prophets in our relationships. We could have prophets in our neighborhood. Anyone who speaks the truth to us, that person plays the role of a prophet. And we come to realize this, that in the first reading, God told Ezekiel that whether the people listen or not, what is most important is that you have spoken the word. They will know that a prophet was in their midst. They will know that. So the interest of the prophet is not whether people receive the message or not, because there will always be those who will not receive the message. There will always be those who will receive the message, and that is one of the things. We do not force the truth down the throats of people. We don't shove it down people's throats. When we speak the truth, it is meant for people to receive the message based on their own understanding and disposition. So prophecy is not indoctrination. The prophet is not a fanatic who will force people to believe in what he is saying or what she is saying. Ezekiel was told, go speak out. Whether they accept it or not, you have played your own role, and that is what the prophet is called to do. The prophet is called to speak out, and we are called upon to speak out. And we owe it. We owe it to our nation to speak out. We owe it to those who are marginalized, to those who are victimized. We owe it to them to speak out. We owe it to our children, to our children's children. We owe it to them to speak out. We owe it to our conscience to speak out, because the man dies and the woman dies in all those who keep silent in the face of tyranny. The man dies, the woman dies in all those who keep silent, abnormal silence, those who keep silent in the face of evil. And when you stand up to evil and stand up to tyranny, what happens? You may be persecuted. I may be constrained, maligned, victimized. We may be imprisoned because we stand for what is right. We go back to the second readings, and Paul talks about the thorns on his flesh, that he was constrained, but at the end the grace of God is sufficient, and his power is made perfect in our weaknesses. So the strength of the prophet is the grace of God, and that is a grace of courage. So one is not a prophet because they are eloquent. It is not about being eloquent. It is not about being an orator. What makes you a prophet is that you have the grace of God. That is the grace of courage. The courage that dispels every fear, that dispels every timidity. The courage that enables you, empowers you to stand on the side of truth, to stand on the side of righteousness. That is what defines prophecy. You and I, my dear friends, we need this grace. The grace of God is sufficient for us. Now, Jesus today in the gospel, he was amazed at the lack of faith of his own people. Recall that he was also amazed at the great faith of the centurion. The centurion, a pagan. And what did the pagan do? The pagan told Christ, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say your word and my servant shall be healed. A pagan had such great faith. Christ was amazed at the faith of a pagan. He was also amazed at the lack of faith of his own people. And this proves the point that faith is not transmitted by biological or ethnic or tribal affiliation. Because you know what, my dear friends? You and I know this, that you could have parents who have faith, but the child may have no faith. You could have a child who has a strong faith, but the parents have no faith. I have seen those who have no faith, yet they come from families of priests and religious, but they have no faith. So faith is not transmitted by biological or tribal affiliation. Faith is transmitted true experience. It is when we have an experience with Jesus Christ, that is what validates our faith. And what is this experience? It is the experience of the truth. That is what strengthens our faith. The truth spoken by the prophet, that is the experience we all need that will generate and validate our faith, because we are called upon to walk by faith and not by sight. The truth from the lips of the prophet, the truth that invites us to realize and to recognize who we truly are and who God is to us. That is the truth we all need. The truth that will heal us, the truth that will set us free.